Hello and welcome to the Agenda on Labour Social with me, Graham Hughes, and Phil Morehouse of A Different Bias fame. How you doing, Phil? You all right this week?
Thank you. Yes.
Goody. And this week we're going to be talking about scandals because we seem to be drowning in them. The big one, obviously, this week we've heard more about the post office scandal than ever before because ITV made a drama about it. So now we just need to make a drama about the COVID PPE, VIP lane scandal. Scott Benton, we should need to make a drama about him. The guy in Blackpool North, we should make a drama about him. HS2, that will make a good little drama, I think. Partygate, well, we've already had one of Partygate, but it's on Channel 4. And I'm thinking it was on ITV, then it might have had more of a punch.
Yeah, I mean, Channel 4 is slightly left-leaning, so inevitably it attracts certain types of voters who would already not be very happy with Boris Johnson anyway. ITV, a little bit different.
Yeah. That big shout out to Tinkinator there. £10 super chat straight in at the start. Thank you. Hi, both. Do you think the transformation of the Labour Party into a Democrat-esque style party is a sign of our chance for a more radically left... our chance that our chance for more radically left politics is dead, at least for the foreseeable future?
No, it's how you achieve it. And the thing is, when you say Democrat-esque, what you basically mean is electable again, like professional political party. If you look at what Biden's done since becoming president, I'm actually quite surprised, because what is that? That is actually effectively, it's not Bernie Sanders' radical left policies, but it is. It was a huge shift to the left. It wasn't a nudge to the left, was it? When Biden came in, it was huge. The amount of jobs he's been creating, and he's not been creating in the same. I mean, America's a very different beast to us anyway, because it's just London sucks everything up. Biden's done since his. Is it freezing again? All right. So when Biden has come in since becoming president, he's made sure that there's a lot of investment being spread around and targeted at areas, the sort of what we would call the left behind areas that Trump tapped into.
Yeah.
So, and obviously now it's not easy. We know that Labour, although they're not making a big song and dance about it, which is why people can easily forget about it. Labour's big thing is that more decisions should be made locally about how they spend their money. Something that might actually have broader appeal than I would have imagined. Because you'll notice, although it was a bit of a fudge, it was a complete fudge. Notice when Rishi Sunak cancelled his HS2, and then he said, "Oh, we're going to use the money saved." By the way, there's no money saved; it's all gone.
Yeah.
But he said we're going to the money saved can go to Network North and each individual. And what happened was they put up that map of Network North, which had like half the projects in the south. But they put up that project at Network North.
Potholes in
it was north of the continent.
It's north of the equator.
Yeah. And then people said, hang on a minute, 2 of those projects were completed like 8 years ago. And some of these others, like, what are you saying that there's going to be the money for this then, or the money for that? And he said, oh, no. These projects don't actually exist. They're just the sort of things you could do. It will be up to those regions to decide how to do it. So that's almost like suggesting that even Sunak is thinking there's an appeal in local regions just being given pots of money and saying, you spend it on what you think is best. Now, I would say you want a half and half. You do want a national strategy to link it all up.
Yeah.
But this idea that you just say, here is a pot of money, if like, 2 regions that are close to each other decide that they want to link up with and pool their resources in a common project, sure, but you spend it in the way that's going to be best for your area. That is something that Labour want to do. Now, doing it and it's easier said than done when the economy is knackered, because you've got this dual problem in the reality is the reason why this hasn't naturally occurred is because your best return on investment is basically dumping it in or around London.
Yeah.
So you have a situation where you're talking about public investment that is not technically going to get you the best financial return when you also have to try and grow the economy when it's been stagnant for 15 years.
Yeah.
So it's
well, I mean, potholes is maintenance. It's not an investment. It is maintenance.
It's quite weird. We've had two you can point at two things that show that the Conservatives are not serious. Like we had this week at PMQs, that silly cow standing up and talking about the discovery of some mollusks in the Thames.
That we can't even sell. That we can't even sell to the EU. But that's because of Brexit, Phil. If it hadn't been for Brexit, those
we could have done because
bivalve mollusks wouldn't have existed.
Yeah, they'd need to be purified because you're not going to tell me anyone's going to eat anything that's been dredged out from the Thames. Your guts will literally explode.
Those bivalve mollusks are happy bivalve mollusks.
Yeah. Well, they are because no one wants to eat them. Right. So apparently that's a Brexit benefit. I don't know whether she meant their existence or their discovery, but either way. But again, it's like, so if there were genuine Brexit benefits, they'd be shouting them from the rooftops. If they have to come up with crap like this, if there were actual Brexit benefits and you somehow tried to work out that this was one of them, it would be like number 2000 on the list. It would never get mentioned because it'd be just like, it's just throwaway. So the fact that someone has to give this prominence just shows how much they're scratching around for a Brexit benefit.
Yeah, how little has been.
And the fact that Rishi, so that shows there are no Brexit benefits, that they have to come up with that crap. And it's not like someone said, name me 1,000. They've said, name one.
I saw an interview with Jacob Rees-Mogg a couple of years ago, and he said they could change the signage in some tunnel in
the Dartford
London,
tunnel.
So that instead of it being in meters, it could be in yards.
And what that would mean is that they'd be even closer together, which would actually cost more.
Yeah, but they could be in
and it'd be more
now.
Bureaucracy. There'd be more signs. That means more bureaucracy.
But Phil, the road signs everywhere else are just in miles.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean...
Well, yards, but yeah. Like you have a 300, 200 and 100 yard marker before you exit a motorway.
Yeah, you do. Yeah.
Basically, the law in this country
with the number at the end, it's in miles, it's not in kilometers.
The law in this country, we do use metric. Metric is used basically everywhere, except for a few small exceptions, and one of them is on roads. We use miles and yards on roads because we didn't want to confuse people, I suppose, at the time. And there's a couple of other circumstances. I can't remember. What's some other? I can't remember. Pints in pubs, not of wine, but of like things you would reasonably have a pint of at one go. But in most cases, we are metric. Everything's metric. If you've got some food packaging, it has metric units. It can have imperial. There's nothing to stop it. It's just that the metric measurement has to be the more prominent. So and the other thing is,
it's such a pathetic little thing as well. And the metric system's so much better. I like it if I'm baking and I've got 200 milliliters of milk, and I don't need to measure it out in a jug like this, holding it up. I can literally pour it onto the scales.
You have to measure it out. You sometimes have to measure it out. It's just easier. But the other thing is,
you put it into the scales and it weighs 200 grams. Yeah. Perfect.
You could do that with imperial, though, in theory. But
fluid ounces.
Yeah, where it comes into its own is I will challenge anyone who backs imperial. I will simply say, okay, then. So how many miles are 6,234 yards? And they won't be able to work it out without a calculator, or if they're actually clever, a pen and paper. They can't do it in their head. Whereas I can say to some of the metric systems, so how many kilometers are 6,234 meters? And it's like, well, 6.234.
Yeah.
It's like that simple. You're moving a decimal point. It couldn't be simpler. But anyway, that's that thing. And then the other one was this issue of potholes being described as investment. So when I say, for example, there is no investment, like the Conservatives were borrowing 140 billion pounds a year, it's not for investment, so we're not going to get a return. So actually that is being paid back for in taxes. Labour's 28 billion pounds a year is for investment. So it's like like a business expanding. Yes, there's an initial cost, although in this case you're borrowing it. So actually there isn't an initial cost if you can get a loan from the bank, because as long as by the time you need to start paying it back, you're profiting from it, then it's not costing you anything. It's making you more money because the extra profit pays for the loan and some more as well. That's why you're expanding. Whereas the current 140 billion pounds a year that we're borrowing, that isn't for investment. And the reason I can say there's no investment, not just because they've cancelled HS2, which was the only form of investment. Rishi's, again, it's like the Brexit thing. If the Conservatives were investing in the future, they'd be shouting all their investment schemes from the rooftops.
Yeah.
Whereas what has Rishi Sunak actually called investment? Fixing potholes. By 2030,
Phil,
not even now.
Phil,
by
I'm sorry to
2030.
correct you there, but the government invested £110 in the Teesside Freeport project. And for every pound they put in, they lost £1.43 million.
Yeah. It's like a more extreme version of the Royal Mail sale, wasn't it? Where they sold it. Oh, we're going to sell it, privatize it, and then the people who initially got those shares immediately sold them for a higher price.
Yes.
And then George Osborne was left trying to justify how he'd sold it. Given that he was selling it off in the first place, why he sold it so cheaply.
Yeah, but no one mentions that. They go on about Gordon Brown selling off the gold.
Which he didn't. He just he changed it into other assets so that
we took our gold.
So we actually benefited from it. He invested it in things that gave us a better return. He didn't just sell it and stuff it in his pockets or spend it on pizza. Yeah, we basically diversified our
pizza,
stock.
That guy. But yeah, I mean, that one is just one that drives me, because you find that when you sort of argue with Tories or with Brexiteers, they always tend to pick on these really small, insignificant bullshit things that they think are dead important, and they just ignore the macroeconomics of it all. They ignore the fact that we've had £1 trillion worth of assets moved out of the country since Brexit, because financial houses aren't happy keeping the money. There's no point.
No.
We've lost all the clearing houses for clearing the euro.
Yeah,
we were whinging about it. Oh, we were taking it away.
One. Again,
we asked them to.
Couple of weird Brexit things that have come up this week, and I saw the dumbest of all just before I came on today. But one of them was they were going on about, so there's Make UK and another group have been polling their members, so manufacturers, and they're saying there's a majority of their members saying they're more optimistic than they were a year ago, and they're hailing this as a Brexit benefit. And I'm trying to say to them, they're saying they're more optimistic than they were a year ago when we also had the hard Brexit. They're not saying things are better than they're saying things are better than they were when Liz Truss was monkeying about. They're not saying things were better than they were in 2019 before we left the EU. That's not all in the single market. So it's hey, they see a thing. It's Brexit.
Listen,
and then the other.
I know I'm beating you up, but I'm hitting you less hard than I was a year ago.
Well,
it's can you just stop beating me up? How about that?
There's another one about this office block. So obviously, when we left the EU, there was lots of EU organizations, shall we say, based the pharmaceutical, the main EU pharmaceutical base. People talk about things being in Brussels all the time. That's where the Parliament is. But lots of the bureaucracy spread all across Europe, across member states. So we had a certain amount of it in this country, quite a lot of it, in fact, in London, and it's all moved out now. And there's this one office block which now, because no one's using it, it looks like the EU are liable for the bill. And it's a big bill as well, $250 million or something silly. And the Brexiteers say, hey, this is funny, isn't it funny? It's okay, let's think about what this represents. It's an office block in London, but the reason why the EU will be liable for it is because no one's using it. So that means that office block is not hosting any jobs when it used to. So it's not generating any incomes which would go into our tax coffers. It's not contributing to the local economy. It's not even spending in the local sandwich shops. It's an office block that's empty in London because of Brexit. And this 250 million quid, if they do have to turn it up, that's not going to go into our coffers. That's going to whoever owns that office block, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, they're describing this as, oh, this is funny, isn't it? It's like, you idiots. This is the sort of thing I might report as a Brexit damage.
Yeah.
It's the sort of thing I might do a video on. This office block is completely empty. It's not providing any jobs, an entire tower block, a huge tower block of offices, not providing any jobs.
Yeah.
Not providing for the local economy into the local taxes because of Brexit. And yet you've got Brexiteers who think it's in their favour.
But the Brexiteers, they love to talk about the cost of stuff, the cost of this, the cost of that. Unless in their benefit where they go, oh, well, look how much money we could make as part of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And the way they work that out is by literally adding up the GDPs of all the countries that are in.
As if they're going to stop buying off anyone else, including themselves, and
just going to give us all their
spend
money
on British goods.
And they go, oh, this is how much it's worth. It just smacks of a massive, I don't know. It's not just British people. It's people all over the world. When you start talking about big numbers, anything over, I don't know, 17, the brains just melts. They're like, I can't cope. I can't cope with this big number. It seems fantasy to me. Yeah. And that fantasy thinking is what led us to Brexit, I think. A lot of people in the chat talking about metric and Imperial. What I have found in my life is when I lived in Panama, it was all in Imperial because it's kind of like an old American colony, sort of. So whenever you bought wood, it was in feet and inches. I find Imperial better to divide and metric better to multiply.
No, metric's easier for both. You're just moving a decimal point. It's
just but like when you're dividing it, decimal points go all mad. That's what I mean. So a quarter, expressed as a decimal point, is 2.5. A third is 0.3333 forever.
Yeah, that's fine. You can just say a third. That's not a problem.
A third, which is Imperial.
Well, no, it's not. It's a fraction. It's a fraction.
Do we ever use a third of a centimeter?
You could, if you wanted to, describe something. You don't have it as a measure. You just say 0.33. Exactly. But you say point. You only need to give it as precisely as you need to know. If you like 0.33 of a centimeter, you haven't got anything that measures anything smaller than that. You haven't got any vernier calipers.
3 syllables, though. That's a whole 3 syllables. To me, that's even like 3 clicks.
There's only 3, as far as I know. There's only 4 things. I can only think of 4 things off the top of my head that use Imperial. So it's roads,
yes,
pubs,
yes,
Warhammer, and yes. Like bolts, things like that. So in a socket set, you'll have metric and Imperial sockets.
Which is annoying.
Some bolts are in Imperial.
Which is very annoying, I've got to say. Okay, I would rather have stuff in millimeters because that makes more sense to me for bolts. But when you're cutting wood and you're trying to take a section of the wood off, I find it easier to work in Imperial. It's my personal preference. I just find it easier to divide in my head something by, say, 12 or a foot by 12.
Well, I mean, it could have been easier, isn't it? Because metric is just based on this idea of moving decimal points around. There are engineers who will argue that instead of a decimal system, we should have had a hexadecimal system anyway. Yeah. Which that system would have been better for everything. Yeah. But it really doesn't matter. Whenever a socket is missing, it's the 10mm one. Why would the socket ever be missing? Put it back, you fool.
Oh, no,
when you're finished with it, put it back.
Oh my God, I think you'd have a nervous breakdown if you saw my garage.
I'm really untidy person, like spectacularly untidy. One time when I left a job, you get some presents when you leave, obviously, and I got a Mr. Messy mug. I went, "What's this about?" Then they all just laughed. I'm incredibly untidy, but my screwdriver attachments, my drill bit, I don't really drill these days, and my sockets all go back when I finish with them.
Right.
Because the reason I'm untidy is I still know where everything is. So, because my attitude is you put stuff where you're going to need it, which isn't always tidy. But I do know where stuff is. Whereas my partner will just put things away. It'll all look nice. And then she doesn't know where it's gone. Which is why I keep having to buy scissors. We've got about 20 scissors in this house.
I'm messy, but my partner's very tidy and she puts things where they go. And if I don't know if I can't remember for whatever reason where that thing is kept, she's like, "How can you not remember this?"
And this is it.
My brain just can't remember stuff.
But this is the point.
I can tell you the capital of Bhutan, but I literally can't tell you where the spoons are.
I don't know whether it's just how men's brains work, but you just leave it where you want it. Like, for example, I have my shower gel. When I'm having a bath, I have my shower gel and shampoo by the bath on the floor. Yeah. It's the obvious place to put it. Yeah. The obvious place to put it would actually be on a metal tray. I used to, when I lived alone, had one of those trays that goes across the bath because I never used to use the bath for a shower. Well, we can't do that here because some people use it as a shower. Yeah. So obviously you put it on the floor, but apparently that's untidy.
So JD saying Graham's confusing factions with Imperial. No, what I mean is, so like if you have 10 of something and you try and get a third or a quarter of it, it's a bit difficult to express.
But if we'd have had
decimal, but if you're cutting a piece of wood and you're like, this needs to be a third of the size, so I can fit 3 of these pieces in, or a third of a foot, right?
Was it after what if it's a fifth?
It's well, it's never a fifth, is it? Because that wouldn't go into a foot.
Sometimes it's a fifth. Sometimes you need to cut a foot piece of wood into 5 bits. Then what are you going to do?
Okay, so what would that be in metric?
So that'd be 6 centimeters. If you're going to say about 30 centimeters, obviously it's 30.54 centimeters, but it's 30 centimeters.
30
you would then say 6 centimeters.
Yeah, and then I've got to divide that by 5,
which is right.
I suppose a third of it would be 10 centimeters.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. What about 4? What about a quarter though? That's more.
So that would be 7.5 centimeters.
You're more likely to have to cut something into quarters or thirds.
So it's 7.5. I mean, that's just maths.
I don't know. Just for me, I think when I'm dealing with wood, I like it to be an Imperial.
You can do as you please.
A third of something is still a third where you're using metric or imperial. Yes, but on your measuring tape, you've actually got, if you're doing a third of a foot, you actually have a marker where it says 4 inches. You don't have a marker at 2.5
yeah, you do.
millimeters.
You get the 2.5 millimeters?
Yeah. You don't have
that's not a third of a foot.
I know, but if it was a third of a...
You're talking about a tiny thing.
All right, okay. Well, I mean, there's no marker.
Comparably, 4 inches would basically be 10 centimeters. There's a marker for that on the measuring tape.
You have a quarter of an inch. There was a mark on your tape for a quarter of an inch. There was no mark on your tape for a quarter of a centimeter.
Yeah, there's 6 mil though.
How long is that wood? Bet you 2.4 meters.
If you go to B&Q, it will be in meters and centimeters.
Yeah,
your bit of wood. You can get ones where the cross section's measured in inches. You can get that still.
Yeah, but meters are based on a millionth of the distance from the equator to the
the change
North Pole, as measured in the 1730s. By Monsieur Celsius and Monsieur de la Condamine, both that set out scientific expeditions, one to as far to the North Pole as they could get back then, and the other one to the equator.
Do you see what Jacob Rees-Mogg's done here? Do you see what Brexit's done? We're supposed to be talking about scandals, now we're talking about units of measure.
Okay, this is all Rees-Mogg's fault.
Yeah.
Number 3 wants to know what's 28 divided by 4.
Well, that's 7.
7. The answer is V11. Smart ass. Nick says we are metric except for roads, allotments, pubs, horses, Land Rovers, and milk. Land Rovers? Are Land Rovers not made?
If a socket set has Imperial measures in it, sometimes you will use those. Like you get spanners and sockets that have Imperial as well as metric.
SCC Gunny is saying, stop arguing like Brexiteers. Right, should we go back onto Tory scandals, which is what we're supposed to be talking about?
It's like the Reformation again.
So, the post office scandal, obviously, this is a huge thing, and someone's put in the chat already, making what you want to do is make a drama out of a crisis, which I thought was a good way of putting it. I think that was number 3 who said that. So, like, I'm just thinking now we should be making dramas about all this stuff.
Yeah, but then
the VIP lane. Oh my God.
I mean, first of all, it would then be obviously anti-Tory, which I know we might not oppose, and then it could sort of turn people off. Things like this, like there are dramas of all these things. There was a drama about how the Brexit referendum was wangled. There's a drama about Partygate. You do get these political dramas. This post office one just happened to chime with the public. Just the stars aligned on it. You could make a drama about something else that we think the public should know about, and it would like people would watch it, but it would make no waves. So it's not always, straightforward. I mean, really, what we need is for the media to be bloody well reporting on it.
Channel 4 did the Partygate drama, which it was absolutely enraging. But because it was on Channel 4, not that many people watched it. It's not as mainstream as BBC or BBC One or ITV. Singers of Parliament. It didn't get really like a buzz about
The other
it.
thing as well about the post office scandal, unlike something like Partygate, is it's not actually, the reason I haven't really covered it, it's not really political. People are trying to make it political now by trying to throw mud around at everyone. Utterly ridiculous. Not a single minister of any party or politician of any party is actually responsible for the scandal. You can argue that when these things became known, that the government should have realized that there was no way of correcting this. Because just to be clear, what the government have said this week, they're introducing this legislation that's basically going to exonerate everyone. Now, this is bad in two ways. It's bad in, I'm not saying overall it's bad, it's necessary. There's no choice. But it's bad in two ways. The first is that some of those people will actually be guilty. Some people will have fiddled the books, for example. And this is just saying, look, we have to exonerate everyone because the system, any civilized system of justice is based on the idea it is better for a guilty person to go free than an innocent person to go to prison. But the second reason why it's wrong is because the government are basically overturning the decision of the courts. Now, what should normally happen in a situation like this is appeals should be made and the courts overturn them, and the courts have been overturning some. The problem is we do not have the court capacity to do this. It's like the pandemic. This is like a legal pandemic, right? So the NHS was undermined by the Tories to the point where we couldn't cope with this sudden influx of extra healthcare cases. And the legal system's the same. Our legal system has been so badly undermined, it simply cannot cope with the extra capacity needed. So the way they were looking at it is a lot of these people are now quite elderly. The court system couldn't hope to clear this in less than 20 years. So that's why the government have done it. And that's why even I think the Bar Association have said, look, this is dodgy. We don't want this to set a precedent, but we support this move in this particular case because there is no way, you might exonerate a few. And the way they're trying to get around it in case anything comes up in future is, so every person that's going to get this exoneration has to sign a form to promise they haven't broken any laws. So I suppose if later on it transpired, actually, you were really naughty, weren't you? Then they'd have to give the compensation money back. The compensation money, bear in mind, being so far for some really pathetic. Dan Needle was going over the forms they had to fill in up until now, the forms they had to fill in with the post office. And he said, as a lawyer who's worked for a very large legal firm in the past, he said he would not fill that form in himself because it would require specialist legal knowledge to correctly fill these forms. It was pages long, by the way, with lots of guidance and stuff like that. He said, you have no hope of filling this form in correctly without specialist legal advice. And given the size and complexity of the form, he estimated as an experienced lawyer, it would cost you £10,000 to get a suitable lawyer to do that for you.
Wow.
And obviously, these people haven't got that money, so they were filling it in themselves. And then that form was determining the level of compensation. So for some of them, we're getting literally a tenner.
Yeah.
So the whole thing has been a huge miscarriage of justice, but it has been entirely on the part of the post office and Fujitsu. They are wholly responsible. No minister knew about this and tried to cover it up. The only criticism you can have politically is that when it became known, when the scandal started to really emerge a few years ago, and the government should have seen that it was impossible for the legal system, because you should just leave it to the legal system to clear up. They should have realized it was impossible to do that. Officials almost certainly should have, it probably did tell them that. And you could criticize the government for not doing anything. You can definitely criticize the government, as Ian Hislop did, for saying, this is all really difficult, which it was to deal with. And then as soon as that drama comes out, a few days later, they see that people are talking about it. And then within a matter of days after the drama, all of a sudden they can pass this legislation and promise them an extra, what was it, £75,000 each compensation.
Jesus.
So that's the political angle to it. The political angle is not that Ed Davey was post office minister, because he was lied to like every other minister, right? It was not that Keir Starmer was DPP, because the Crown Prosecution Service first of all, only prosecuting a few claims, but even you don't even blame the Crown Prosecution Service because they were given fabricated evidence. At the time they were carrying out those prosecutions, there was no big blow up in the media. Like there was apparently a niche technical journal that said there's something looking a bit funny here, but it's like lawyers aren't going to read that. Private Eye were the first of the media to get onto it, but there's loads of people don't read Private Eye either. And also, if you did read Private Eye, you sort of know sometimes Private Eye are a bit whiffy, and sometimes they will, jump on a horse that turns out to be going nowhere. So you're not going to instantly go, oh, there's something iffy here. Are we, for these few cases for something that's a non-violent crime, are we going to what were they going to do anyway? And none of these went to Keir Starmer's office. So all that's crap as well. But it would also, so no one at all, no politician sitting now or before is responsible because they were all lied to. They were all deceived. What should be happening is we should be saying, where are the prosecutions for those who deliberately lied? Because they should be going to prison. If as a result,
one of them had to hang back a gong.
Well, this is the thing, like the banking crash, isn't it? One person had his knighthood taken off him.
Oh,
that was it.
Poor fella.
When Iceland were putting him in prison.
He'll have to write Esquire after his name now.
It'd have to be Mr. I can't remember his name.
Mr. Oh my God.
It'd be a Mr.
Like
again.
A surgeon.
His wife won't be a lady
for years
anymore.
to be a doctor, and then you become a top surgeon.
Oh yeah,
brain surgeon, and you go back to Mr.
I don't actually understand that. I've never actually understood that. What's the bloody point?
It's because of the tradition was.
Yeah, I dare say it is. It's a stupid tradition.
They weren't doctors; they were barbers.
Yeah,
and butchers.
But now they're not. They're highly trained doctors. So, for goodness' sake, if there's anything that would have got me as a doctor to go, oh, should I go down the surgery or physician route? It's like, what do you mean? I've just worked all this time to be called doctor, and now you want to go back to Mr. again. No. I think I'll be a physician if you don't mind. You probably get sued less often as well.
My partner is Dr. Catherine, and she has her doctorate in physics.
Yeah.
So not much help in a traffic accident.
I don't know.
Is there a doctor on board this plane?
You can explain why the accident happened.
Doctor of physics. Yeah. The physical force that'd be useful.
You can explain why it happened.
She did a PhD on lasers though, so I don't think that.
I'm pretty well. Okay, if I can speak with some authority on like mechanics, I'm pretty sure she can as well.
Anyway, but yeah. So one of the things I was quite fascinated by. What is this? Has the post office got like a special thing where it can actually put people on trial itself?
Well, anyone can prosecute. So yes and no, they didn't sort of have their own court system created for them, but they did have their own legal department set up so that they could prosecute, like the RSPCA prosecute. So it's not that all prosecutions are led by the CPS at all. Those tend to be the ones that police investigate. Right. So when it comes to a lot of things like this, is something like this, organizations do prosecute.
Yeah. The thing is with this is that people had known about there being a problem with the software back in 2010. It was being reported in that Private Eye. I know you say
in Private Eye, yeah, but again, it needed.
It's not about the compensation or whatever. It's the fact that they were still prosecuting people up until 2015.
Even then, again, did anyone know, it's like, oh, Private Eye, these people who hate all politicians are saying there's something dodgy about it. It's like, as if you're a politician, you think, well, they say there's something dodgy about everything, right? You can't buy a packet of hobnobs without Ian Hislop getting upset. So, there is that. You can understand that. Like, at the end of the day, there's no evidence of any cover-up. There's no evidence that any minister, and in 10 years' time, we'll find out anyway, because the 20-year rule will mean all these records will be published from 2013. I mean, we've already, every year we have another load. And so we've had the records from from whatever, certainly from 2010 to 2013 already. Nothing dodgy has come up about this. So there's no ministers, and there's no evidence that any minister knew about it. It's just at the moment there's a lot of it's basically it's corporate behavior on a massive scale that needs to be cracked down on. Because here's the thing: you can do what you can to try to compensate the victims now. You'll never actually do it, but you can do what you can at least now.
Yeah.
But if you want to stop it happening to more people, you have to make sure there are consequences.
Yes.
Absolutely have to make sure there are consequences.
This was going to be my next question. Presumably Labour, if they win, they are going to, they've already said they're going to start an investigation into HS2 debacle and the VIP lanes. Right. So we know we're going to get at least two.
COVID inquiry is going to look at that regardless.
Oh, I thought they were going to.
They may well do, but the COVID.
Oh, sorry,
inquiry...
no, it was clawing back the COVID fraud.
Yes, they're going
slightly different.
Yeah.
I mean, it's linked, but
yeah.
And this is billions of pounds worth of that's thousands of millions of pounds worth of fraud that our previous Chancellor of Exchequer, now Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, has written off.
Yes.
And Labour are saying, hey, hang on, we're going to sort this out. Now we're going to have someone as our Prime Minister, all being well, who is a former Director of Public Prosecutions. What else can change? You sometimes talk about them giving more money to the not the Crown Prosecution Service. What's it called? The Serious Crimes
National
Office.
Crime Agency.
National Crime Agency. That's the one. Is there anything else that Labour can do to sort of get these people on the hook? And
they can. Yes.
Like, can they get them on? Because
yes,
the way I look at it,
but whether they do is another matter.
Yeah, you can't make a law to say, which they've said they're going to do, to make defrauding the public purse against the law.
Specific.
But you can't make that work.
No. The thing is, though, it is so that the reason why you would make it a specific crime, it is already illegal. It's still fraud. There are general crimes against it, and you can still prosecute them under those. But if you have the reason why sometimes you create if a particular form of a crime, a specific form of a crime becomes very widespread or very serious, you can make a specific offence for that, so that it's easier to investigate and prosecute.
Right.
Because when you're trying to use general things, then there's all sorts of legal arguments about what that word in that piece of legislation means and what that means and how it applies to this.
Next year, they rush through a piece of legislation that says, right, there's going to be a new law now that specifically says defrauding the public purse that is going to be a crime. We can't do Michelle Mone and John Barrowman.
No, they can still be So any legacy cases would still, as far as I can tell, be prosecuted under the old laws. But there are laws. It's just that, but you just have to resource the National Crime Agency to do that.
Yeah.
But what you can do is to make it clear. I mean, one thing you can do that can apply retroactively is you can change the sentencing guidelines to make it more severe. But again, I mean, that's, you can't. It's just something that's just red meat for voters. That is said, we'll larger sentences. Like I keep saying, two problems. First of all, our prisons are full. So you'd have to pop up some more prisons and some prison officers to staff them. And secondly, when people like Rishi Sunak talk about deterrence, like he talked about the Rwanda plan. Oh, yes, it'll absolutely be deterrent. These people are thinking, it would deter me if I was going to be sent to Rwanda. But it's like, yeah, but you're not desperate. Yeah. So when you're talking about people like that, these white collar criminal, like this, these ermine collar criminals, these people really.
I like that.
But when you talk about those people, you don't need to toughen the sentence. 5 years in prison is a deterrent for these people. If you're very wealthy, 5 years in prison is a hell of a sentence for you. Yeah. Whereas for someone who's struggling, it's like, I'm going to get free meals and a warm cell. Lovely.
Yeah.
I mean, I've known people who have, in the past, I've known a few dodgy characters. I've known a few people, and it would get to winter and they couldn't afford to pay the bills.
Yeah.
And they would just rob. And if they got caught, they go to prison. It's their life was so shit anyway. Yeah. It was worth
it's like when
the
we
risk.
Talk about, it's like when
because
we talk
then
about
they'd be warm.
Penalty. The death penalty is not a deterrent for murder. Well, if it was, a country like the USA, which has the death penalty in many states, would not have a murder rate 5 times what it is.
Yeah, that's the other thing. When you commit a really serious crime, it's on the basis that you think, well, either you're mentally unstable or you think you're going to get away with it.
Yeah.
Because, prison is a deterrent for wealthy people. So why do wealthy people commit crimes? They don't believe they're going to get caught for them. It's really that simple. Yeah. So what you have to do, and this comes back to the post office thing, you have to make it clear that it's not hit and miss. You can't have every 10 or 20 years a case that just gets so bad that someone goes to prison. These people, when they're committing crimes like this, have to think to themselves, there is actually a serious prospect of me going to prison, and then they won't do it.
Yeah,
they will not do it. The people who were behind all this, who were deliberately prosecuting people when either they knew that those convictions would be unsafe or they strongly believed that their evidence was dodgy and they were fiddling it, those people, I guarantee, would not have behaved like that if the reason they were doing it is because it was the most profitable thing to do for their companies. Yeah. But they will not put their own personal liberty ahead of that company's profit.
No, you're right. But also, we need, just people are talking about in the chat as well, Fujitsu, but just someone mentioned Serco as well. Yeah. There are so many companies that have got these massive, massive contracts from the government, and they have messed it up. I mean, you could talk about the rail companies that have just messed everything up. They've made a bad situation worse, made things awful. I
remember,
and none of them are punished for it. No. They go on to get more contracts in the future, and the government never says, "Hey, we paid you X amount of money to do this, and you haven't done it. Can we have our money back?" Now, my question is, can Labour get the money back?
Yes.
For stuff that's been done in the past,
still a government
13 years ago.
I don't know how long ago. There's presumably, like there is in a lot of civil cases, statute of limitations. So I don't know. I'm not a legal expert there. But in general, they can, even it doesn't matter that it's not their government contract, one issued by the Conservatives, it's still Her Majesty's government contract, and Labour can make sure it's fulfilled. Labour, in terms of issuing future contracts, though, interestingly, Labour have said they've got a formal policy of saying that they will prioritise companies who treat and pay their workers well. So it's not always going to be on a pure cost basis. It's going to be a link to that. And you could easily add in, oh, and by the way, ones who don't send 500 innocent people to prison.
Yes. But I mean, it's not just that. It's the fact that these companies, if they don't fulfill the contract, the government needs to go after them.
They do.
In the way that the zeal that they go after people who claim an extra £7.48 on their fucking benefits each week, and they're like, "Oh, you've got to get that money back. It's very important. We get that money back."
Or even sometimes
fast
when they
the government, the police, the government, the system, the establishment move when it's a normal person who's accused of doing a tiny crime. But
or may not even have done that.
Yeah,
they may have been overpaid. They may have been overpaid accidentally, fault of the system, no one's fault. They didn't realize they spent it and now they want it back. And then if you can't, then you can be then in the frame because you are deemed to have stolen it. Because you're supposed to check every penny. You're supposed to be like an accountant, as opposed to someone who doesn't have enough for the basics, and when they get a little bit extra, they don't think about it. So there's no presumption of innocent when it comes to benefit.
So do you think these conversations are actually going on right now in Labour?
In Labour, who knows? Like the issue is, you can focus on a thing that's broken about our country and an obvious solution, or what seems to be an obvious solution, and you can assume that Labour must be talking about that. But there must be thousands of things that are a huge problem, and that Labour will be talking about. So they can only. It's just like, you can imagine 1,000 projects that will all give a return on public investment, and Labour won't be able to do all of them because you've only got so much money to invest. The same thing can apply for legislative time, like parliamentary time. There could be thousands of things that you could use parliamentary time to do that would make an improvement, that would prevent various injustices happening. Which ones do you prioritize? And even talking about them takes up a lot of time.
Yeah. But it's fascinating how few bits of legislation that this government has got through in the last 13 years. I mean, if you don't count the Henry VIII laws of converting hundreds of EU laws into British laws or getting rid of them entirely because they weren't applicable. They were about olive farming, which is something that we don't do, etc. They've done sod all. And I was thinking about the mirror here with the Republicans in America. They're too busy feathering their own nests, lining their own pockets, doing jobs for the boys, Bob's your uncle, and all that kind of shit. And the reality of the everyday work of Parliament's just not being done. You're having people complaining about the lack of things happening in Parliament. That they're all knocking off early because there's nothing to debate, and they're not using the legislative time effectively. And we talk about Labour and like them literally running out the clock on all the things that they've got to do. And I look at the Americans, and this year or last year, the Republican Party, or this in this term, that they've been in a slender majority of the House of Representatives, they've passed about 23 bills, and one of them was like changing the mascot of a high school team or something. It was honestly something so trivial. It was painful. And this is a country of over 330 million people. You'll think there needs to be some legislative action going on in some cases, I'm pretty sure, to stop more train crashes like the one that we saw in Palestine. Was it Palestine? Well, it was the place in America that horrific train derailment. And they were very lucky that didn't happen near a city. Jesus.
Yeah.
But like, it's the least amount of bills that have gone through the House of Representatives since something like the 1920s. When, for whatever reason, Congress didn't sit for 9 months of the year.
Well, that was start of the decade of the Depression, wasn't it?
I don't know exactly what it was, why they didn't sit. As someone who's a scholar of American political history can tell me, but it's on that kind of scale. They're too busy bickering amongst themselves, backbiting, fighting culture wars over shadow boxing.
Because they don't do it. It's like you say, they don't do anything, and they don't want to do anything. They see it. I don't know about the Republicans specifically. The Republican Party has changed a great deal over the last 50, 60 years, whereas the Conservative Party, I mean, okay, the current lot are an extreme lot, but they haven't fundamentally changed. In that for 200 years, they've seen it as their role to stop other people governing. They're seat blockers. That's what they do. They're basically the government equivalent of getting on a bus and seeing someone else come on and putting your bag beside you. No, there's no room here. That's what it is. They're just there to stop other people getting on with the job of government. So, of course, they then spend all their time feathering their nest. They're bored. They don't know what to do. It's like, oh, we're running this great department now. Oh, but we don't believe in state control, so we're not going to run this department. Instead, what we're going to do is work out how we can make ourselves fabulously wealthy. Because the only departments they actually believe in are the Home Office and the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, and it's the Commonwealth bit they like. And the Ministry of Defence. The rest of it can go to hell. Well, what do we want a department for education? What's that for?
We come on to this in a moment.
Educate our children privately.
I did want to talk about the Commonwealth for some reason. But first of all, heading over to Singapore to say thank you very much to Canal there for the super chat. So much Tory sleaze makes a fella dry. Have a pint on me. A pint of wine for you, Phil.
Still haven't
you having a pint of wine?
Bottle. I shall have to finish that sometime.
It's going to taste like vinegar, mate. It's been open for 2 weeks. No. But yes, what I was going to talk about a little bit before we sign off, NATO, because there was a recent report this week that when Trump was talking to Ursula von der Leyen, I think, back in 2020, he basically said, NATO is over. We're not going to come to your aid. You can all piss off.
He said, now, if Europe's invaded, we won't help you.
Yes. So that's less of a problem now because we've got Biden in, but there is the threat that Trump might be re-elected, or even if he isn't re-elected,
and also
even with mount a successful insurrection this time and take over government,
and even much harder to do when he's not the sitting president. But the even with Biden in charge, obviously Congress has the purse strings.
Yes.
So when Republicans decide that they're going to block it, either because they're already bought off by Russia, or even if it's not that, if they, because they often just see it as a way of making Biden look weak, because it's the way you make the president look weak is you don't allow him the funding needed. to do even things you agree with.
Yes.
It's party politics. It's party politics above
they're the
real
people
politics.
who talk about playing politics, and it's Labour and the Democrats who want to get on with the job, which is something that the phrase they always use, and it's the Tories and the Republicans who are always blocking this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But the president has a lot of power. And one of the things I mentioned earlier in the week is the fact that if you are a president of the United States, you can launch an invasion of another country without asking anyone's permission.
They're the commander in chief.
You don't have to put it through Congress. You don't have to, because this links in with what's happened with Yemen. We bombed Yemen last night.
Yes.
And no one got to sign off on that apart from the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister called cabinet together and said, we're bombing the Houthis in Yemen. And it's the same in the US. The American president has a lot of leeway through a law that came in, I think, in the Second World War, which says that the commander-in-chief can set the troops off to wherever he wants. It's usually a he. It's always been a he. And has to then ask Congress for permission after the event. And if they have a vote and they say no, he has 6 weeks to withdraw the troops. So the fact that
the reason for that is because if your country is actually attacked, you don't have time to discuss it in committee before acting. But like you say, it would then still have to go to a vote when there's time, and if it was deemed in the national interest, then of course the vote would pass. And if it's not, then it's like, okay, well, you have the power to do it in the national interest, but in this case you haven't. So can you stop it, please?
You can do a lot of damage in 6 weeks. So that,
yes,
I mean, in a way, that's terrifying if Trump's in charge. It's kind of weirdly reassuring if Biden's in charge, because it means that even if the House of Representatives is completely at loggerheads by its own, majority party that can't agree on anything and only has I think they have a working majority of 2 now. 2.
Something like that.
But I was saying the other day, the upper house in America, which represents 333 million people. There's 50 people in the upper house in the Senate. In our upper house, the House of Lords, we have over 800 lords.
But they don't represent anyone in our country. They're just appointed. I mean, there are so many things wrong with it. As I say, it sort of worked because all it was a revising chamber anyway. It didn't matter if it didn't agree on things. It's just different now. But it ultimately, if you do start to examine the House of Lords as an upper chamber, it doesn't represent any part of the country.
Yeah.
It's certainly not representative across the country. Like the House of Commons at least covers the country, and roughly equivalent number of electors to each seat, sort of broadly anyway. That isn't the case in the House of Lords, not remotely the case. Most of these people, because they are, even if we ignore all the very unsuitable ones, because they will be former politicians or former judges or former lawyers or former business leaders or current business leaders or former, senior members of trade unions, they're people who by and large live in or around London because that is the political heart of the country.
Yeah.
So most of the members of the House live in London. They don't just have a second home there. They live in London, in or around London. And so, there's no representation there at all. There are some parts, like the SNP, don't even send members to the House of Lords.
Yeah.
So there's huge political gaps in the House of Lords as well. There's, massive gaps in representation. Totally unfair.
Finally, before we sign off, I'd just like to move on to Brexit. Bête noire. The stupidest thing a country has ever done to itself. And I'll include Argentina voting for a chainsaw-wielding anarcho.
Well, should we wait and see first? Should we wait and see?
So there was a report out yesterday, and obviously there was a speech by Sadiq Khan, the mayor of London, which said that Brexit has cost the UK £140 billion so far, and we could be 311 billion worse off by 2035, which is only 11 years away. That is a staggering, eye-watering amount of money. Almost a third of £1 trillion.
Yeah.
That money could have come in handy.
I mean, there's Brexiteers who've been, when I talked about it, are going, oh, why is he wasting, the expected thing, why is he wasting public money on this? And it's like, see, you're not arguing that the report's wrong, are you? Then you're just arguing that money was spent on it. But secondly, of course, the report, I have actually now got a copy of the
waste of money, Phil, not Brexit.
Yeah, I have got a copy of the report. And it's, what it does is it also it examines the impact on the London economy, but then it just does UK while it's at it. Yeah. So there is a justification for the Mayor of London doing it anyway, and it's not like he spent like his entire budget on it. It was just a report commissioned, but it's quite spectacular. Is summary of UK results, GVA, 2023, 2.2 billion. Well, basically what it's saying is by 2035 we will be 10.1% down on effectively the money we're bringing in. So overall that's 311 billion pounds less, 3 million fewer jobs by 2035.
Wow.
32% lower investment, and that's provable, because this is based on the doppelganger UK. It's this fictional UK that never left the EU, which they use by comparing the trends that the UK in the EU had with comparable economies and blah blah blah. So it can take account of global effects. But of course, people who support Brexit don't get data, and something like mathematical modelling is incredibly complex for anyone, even the people carrying out the mathematical modeling. So I can understand how the layman wouldn't understand how a mathematical model of effectively a fictional country can work. I get that. But the investment is really easy to show, because our investment dropped off a cliff in real terms in 2016, because investment is for the next few years. In 2016, we voted to leave the EU. The fact that it didn't happen until 2020 was not on the cut. Some people might have predicted it, but we voted to leave. We voted to leave within a few years, and investment decisions are made over 5-10 years usually.
What's particularly frustrating about that, Phil, is the fact that 2016 was a record year for inward investment into the UK. Foreign direct investment.
It wasn't.
Pardon? No,
I meant afterwards. It wasn't.
Yeah, I know, but up to that point, people were gung ho for investing in the UK. We were on track to overtake Germany's economy. That's how good we were going. But
the other thing is, we
came off.
Yeah, we were the number one source of foreign inward investment in the EU. Yeah. And then we weren't.
The number one, and now we're probably not even the top bloody 100. It's not even 100 countries in the EU, but you know what I mean.
But we've certainly fallen behind. We've fallen behind France.
You reminded me of something there that happened this week. I was listening to the radio. Tom Swarbrick was on, this posh gobshite who's on the LBC. I love that Carol Vorderman's joined LBC. That's great, but she's one of the 9 state school kids on there. The other 11 presenters are all went to the posh schools. Right. Don't look at the list of high court judges. It'll upset you too much. But yeah, he was complaining about the COVID inquiry costing something around the region of £200,000 a day, and the fact that we're going to take it on the road. And he was saying in this supercilious kind of snobbish way, well, I mean, why do they have to spend £200,000 a day on this road show, going to talk to people about how they stayed in their gym jams until 11 o'clock in the morning? And I'm thinking, fuck you. One of my friends died during COVID, and he lay dead at the bottom of the stairs for 3 days because we weren't allowed to go to each other's houses, but Boris Johnson was having parties. Do you know what I mean?
Did this person complain? Did this person complain when the track and trace system was spending £1 million a day on consultants who obviously didn't provide any meaningful input because the system was determined by Parliament to be a complete waste of money?
He made a big point about £200,000 a day was far too much to be spending. And I thought, do you know what? for over 300 days of that inquiry would buy you one deal with Michelle Mone and her husband to get you some dodgy PPE that doesn't even work. Because they took 60 million for that one afternoon of work. And we're talking about an entire committee, a judge, someone going out, doing the investigation. I think that's quite good value for money, all in all.
Yeah.
Considering they might be able to get some money back from it all at the end of this when they say, here's the evidence, here's what people stole, here's what people absolutely took the piss on. But Tom Swarbrick, he's very much sort of old school Tory gobshite. I heard him say once, well, I don't know why we're feeling bad about doing, the slavery stuff back in. I'm paraphrasing. He didn't exactly say this, but he's saying we shouldn't feel guilty about things we did in the past because we didn't do them individually. And I'm like, but we're living off the benefits of those crimes.
Yes. Let me just find this investment thing. Oh no, I don't want that. Go away. Get off. You idiot. Go away. Oh, for goodness sake. Right, click the wrong thing.
Don't show us your emails.
No. It's not.
Don't send me a picture.
No, I've got it. I just need to find it. Brexit. This is a chart I use quite a bit now and then. So that is, our investment. That's it shows the trend from 2000. This is the post. This is the post banking crash trend as well. And after 2016, it just stopped.
That's 100 billion. That's 100 billion right there.
And
foreign direct investment. That's money coming from other countries into our country, which is a great thing because it means that it grows our economy, faster than we can on our own.
Yes.
And
that's the way it is. It's well below that trend line. It's not even back up to the base, but the base is like still not going anywhere. You expect your economy to grow, which means you need investment to keep the amount of investment has to increase. Yeah, and it's not.
And also, don't forget, 100 billion is not worth as much as it used to be.
No,
especially compared against.
I think they do base it. I think this is the Financial Times are usually quite good with these things. It's real index rebased,
right?
So it is in real terms.
Oh, okay. That is it's staggering, isn't it? Absolutely staggering. F. Tumstick, it wants to know, is that graph in inches or meters?
Well, it's in billions of pounds, I think.
And what happened to 2019?
I don't know. It is there.
Sub editors, what are they like? Indeed. Anyway, right. I think we'll leave it at that. Is there anything else that you want to talk about that happened this week?
No, I think this is. I think that's all right.
We covered a lot of stuff.
Yeah,
covered a lot of ground. Was the North, Blackpool, the North Blackpool MP scandal?
Yeah.
Did that come out this week or was that last week? I lost track of all my scandals.
So let me think now. I can't remember. It's about a week ago. I think it may have been the weekend.
Right. Okay. So this is the story that the North Blackpool MP had been using public money to promote himself and the Tory party, which they're not supposed to do, even though the Tory party keep doing that. There was a party political broadcast that they put on the BBC website yesterday. I don't know if it went out on the BBC at some point, but it was Rishi Sunak talking about how they've cut taxes, even though we have the highest tax burden in history. Highest cost of living.
It's getting higher.
Housing crisis.
It's going to keep going higher.
Loans.
And they will be the first to point out that the tax burden in real terms is going higher when Labour in power. Straight away.
Yes.
Straight away. Labour in power for one day. Keir Starmer's not even formed his cabinet officially yet.
Oh, taxes
it's like, we've got the highest. Look at the state of the place. Tax rating.
Look what you made me do.
What's going on?
Anyway, I'll be back at 9 o'clock. Are you around tonight, Phil?
Probably not. No, I've got things to do.
Oh, all right. Well, you have a good weekend, and everyone in the chat, I hope you all have a good weekend. If you want to join us tonight at 9 o'clock for the Labour Social, I'll try and get some, minor celebs along to get drunk and talk bollocks for your pleasure about politics and the news and what's been going on this week. So if you want to kick back and open a can of something and watch that, you are very welcome to join us. And until then, I'll say thank you very much for the chat. Thank you very much for the super chats. And until next time, hello, good evening, welcome, and goodbye.